Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and in today's edition of Arab Affairs, we'll be discussing the latest situation with regards to the Lebanese political and economic situation, and we're delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency Ambassador Hussein, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon to you, madam.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this afternoon. Mr. Ambassador,
my pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. And 2 years now after the biggest non-nuclear explosion in Beirut, which killed and injured many people from Lebanon, the country is still suffering with the fall, and the situation seems to be getting worse on the ground. Could you tell us, Mr. Ambassador, do you think the situation is related to negligence, or is it the political vacuum, with the inability to form a cabinet, that is a result of this?
Well, first of all, there is no accountability for what had happened in Beirut 2 years ago.
Yes.
Investigations are going nowhere, if there are investigations, serious investigations. No one knows for sure the reasons behind the explosion, who is responsible for the explosion. And as a matter of fact, the way the Lebanese establishment dealt with the Beirut port explosion 2 years ago embodies the problems, structural problems facing Lebanon. And the Lebanese people are paying the price. On the other hand, you refer to the economic situation.
Yes.
Undoubtedly, the economic situation in Lebanon is unprecedented in its really impact, disastrous impact on the Lebanese people. And lately, a ray of hope has resided in some press reports that negotiations between the Lebanese government and the IMF have made progress. And the IMF last year has made it clear that they are ready to provide Lebanon with the financial assistance that it needs. Once there is a government, there is a parliament that can guarantee the implementation of the conditions that the IMF would attach to its expected loan to Lebanon. The matter of fact today is that the Lebanese politics are very complicated, are very difficult, and to manage. And although there is a prime minister, a designated prime minister, still we are waiting for a government that would really reflect the will, the true will of the people and aspirations of the Lebanese people. And of course, speaking about Lebanese politics, in the next few months, the Lebanese parliament should, according to the Lebanese constitution, elect a new president. And that also is a complicating factor in the Lebanese politics these days. So far, there is no candidate. No serious candidate, because the various political forces, the opposing political forces in Lebanon, so far haven't agreed on a personality that could command the respect not only of the Lebanese people and all political forces in Lebanon, but of the international community.
Which is a very big challenge.
On the other hand, we have to take into consideration the regional impact on Lebanon. Of course, due to the regional polarization, that we are aware of. This regional polarization, of course, has an adverse impact on Lebanese politics.
Indeed, Mr. Ambassador, you raised several issues that I'd like to delve further into. The first of which is the formation of the cabinet. What are the main obstacles to the formation of the cabinet, and how important is it for the cabinet to be formed and selected to deal with the situation in the country?
Well, first of all, the cabinet should be formed, and once the cabinet is formed, the parliament would approve of the government. So, theoretically speaking, you have a functioning or the beginning of a functioning political establishment. And the government on the one hand and the parliament on the other hand would approve the program with the IMF. And that would be the starting point of dealing seriously with the economic crisis facing the Lebanese for the last 2 or 3 years. And the parliament, as you may know, madam,
yes,
would elect, would designate, would approve the new Lebanese president. So a government, a cabinet, a parliament, and the president that enjoys the trust of the Lebanese people and the confidence of major political forces in Lebanon. These are the 3 pillars of a stable Lebanese political establishment that would oversee and would ensure solutions to the economic and financial problems facing Lebanon.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, speaking about the economic situation in the country, the World Bank recently released a report that blamed, Lebanese officials with what it described as a deliberate economic crisis. How do you see these comments, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, deliberate, I'm not sure deliberate, because this is a very serious accusation, and of course, I trust that the World Bank would not go that far without having evidence.
Proof,
but
yes,
for one reason or another, it hasn't shared the evidence with the international community. But having said that, definitely the Lebanese politicians do bear a great responsibility for what has happened in Lebanon in the last 3 years. Having said that, I remember we recall that the Lebanese people, when they had taken to the streets 3 years ago, they wanted a new a new social contract. And personally speaking, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the present political figures in Lebanon would really provide Lebanon with a new social contract.
And, Mr. Ambassador, many people are advocating and stressing that Lebanon or the Lebanese crisis needs a solution from within Lebanon itself, by the Lebanese themselves. Others say it's too late and, they need external help. What is your opinion with regards to this matter?
Definitely, the domestic problems facing Lebanon would be solved only by the Lebanese themselves, because they are some Lebanese are responsible for what happened has happened in Lebanon. So definitely, the Lebanese or any other people shoulder the sole responsibility of finding solutions to the problems that they are facing domestically. But of course, in the case of Lebanon, historically speaking, Lebanon has always been a mirror of regional dynamics. So we cannot separate the future of Lebanon from the region at large. And let us not forget Israeli threats to Lebanese sovereignty. Just 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, the Israeli defense minister threatened the Lebanese by saying that Israel could repeat its aggression. Of course, he did not use the word aggression, but that's the word I used.
Yes, indeed.
That they can launch another aggression against Lebanon, and it would wreak havoc on Lebanon. And strangely enough, madam, there was no official Arab reaction to this statement.
Which is indeed, as you mentioned, Mr. Ambassador,
very strange,
quite surprising.
Very strange. Yes.
How about the role of France, Mr. Ambassador? We've seen, the French president going to and fro and trying to have a more, responsive stance towards the situation in Lebanon. How do you see the role of France considering their history?
Well, of course, historically speaking, France has always had very privileged relations with Lebanon. It's the protector power, if I may use this expression, for the Lebanese Christians, the Maronites, and they don't hide the fact that they are defending and protecting the identity of the Maronites in Lebanon. And of course, they spearheaded the French president, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, in August 2020, immediately after the port explosion, led an international effort to help the Lebanese. He went to Lebanon twice in the last 2 years, and France, under his leadership, has been trying to encourage the Lebanese political establishment to get its act together and come up with a blueprint for Lebanon at present and in the future. But of course, lately we have seen the outbreak of war in Ukraine. We have seen the economic impact of this war on European economies, and so I don't think that either France or any other international power would see Lebanon as a top strategic priority at the present moment, particularly if we take into account the rising tensions in the Far East.
Hussein Haridi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, I'd like to thank you very much, sir, for your time and your insight on today's edition of Arab Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, a quick report on the latest developments in Lebanon, and we'll be back for more. Do stay tuned.
2 years Thursday since a massive explosion ripped through Beirut, a grim anniversary marked by angry protests and the dramatic collapse of blast-damaged grain silos in a cloud of dust. The 2020 disaster, one of the history's biggest non-nuclear explosions, killed more than 200 people and decimated vast areas of the capital after a stockpile of stored ammunition nitrate caught fire. The protests, many of them victims' relatives, are furious that no state official has yet been held accountable over the tragedy. An investigation into the mega blast has been stalled amid political interference. The huge explosion was a nightmarish moment in the chaotic history of Lebanon, which is mired in its worst over economic crisis marked by blackouts, runaways, inflation, and widespread despair. Protests marched towards the wreckage of the silos. A French civil engineer who monitors the silos with sensors earlier told reporters that several more towers could come crumbling down at any time. The government in April ordered the silos demolition, but this has been suspended partially because of the objections from victims' relatives who want them preserved. as a memorial. Meanwhile, the probe is also at risk of falling apart as officials close to the powerful Hezbollah movement have curtailed the work of the lead investigator Tariq Bitar with a series of lawsuits. UN Chief Antonio Guterres on Thursday retreated his call for an impartial, thorough and transparent investigation into the explosion.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. It's a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. And just days before the second anniversary of the Beirut explosions, 2 silos fell, indicating that the negligence still exists, which caused the first tragedy. How do you see the situation in Lebanon on the ground now, Mr. Ambassador?
Very sad story. And I am sorry that Lebanon, although the Lebanese are very wise people and they live together decades with peace and good treatment to each other. Now we have the disease of foreign intervention. If we are divided in tribes and parties, this is something which you can see anywhere. But the bad element when each tribe or each party would bring a foreign force to give him more force against the rest of the country. And this is exactly what is happening. Also, on the other side, it seems that those who are responsible for the killing of Rafi al-Hariri or the explosion in the Beirut port still are free. Also, there are a lot of corruption which is not yet discovered who did it. So Lebanon sometime asked Egypt to help them, and the Egyptian army, Ibrahim Pasha, went there and settled the whole mess. Once again, recently, the Syrian army went there and settled the matter. During the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser, there were some wise people who listened to his advices, and the impact of Gamal Abdel Nasser was very good on the political life in Lebanon. By the way, there are 5 statues for Gamal Abdel Nasser in Beirut. I am not optimistic. The situation is not that good. And I hope that the Arab countries who are still in good position can give good advices and help Lebanese to come back to reason, because this situation wouldn't be for any party's benefit. We need the Arab League, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, all those countries to give good advices and to be a good arbitrator among the Lebanese themselves and come back with the Lebanon which we all love it, and we hope that Lebanon will come to its famous peaceful situation.
Absolutely. In your opinion, Mr. Ambassador, what do you see are the main reasons for the political standoff in the country?
The foreign interference, there are lots of interference from foreign forces. Also the situation in Syria, because Syria is not much better. The situation in Syria, its impact on Lebanon is very bad. So Iraq also is not that good. And this whole area is threatened by one foreign force or another. This is the main reason there.
Frankly, Mr. Ambassador, do you think that the Prime Minister will be able to form, a government, or do you see this political vacuum as becoming further prolonged?
I am hesitant to be optimistic because it is a very difficult task. Nobody is helping the country itself, and everybody is trying to help his party or his tribe or himself. So it is a very difficult task. I hope that reasoning will be the way everyone would tackle the problem with, and I'm not still not very optimistic concerning this task, and the Lebanese must give much more than they are doing to the Lebanon unity instead of the parties' division.
Indeed. Now, Mr. Ambassador, moving to the economic side of things, the Lebanese economy is, struggling as a result of the political sphere, and other issues are being influenced. For example, tourism in the country has dropped drastically because of the insecurity and instability. How do you see the economic side of the coin? What do you expect with regards to the IMF as it has gone through some negotiations with regards to assisting the country?
The economic situation is the direct victim of what is happening in Lebanon.
Yes.
I just could to give you some signs about that. Since I visited Lebanon the first time in 1970, a dollar equals 2.5 lira. And it continued like that until my visit in 2019. I found that the $1 is 1,500 liras. Now it is 30,000. This means that instability around the economic situation, and everybody will be suffering from this. Let us hope that Lebanese, because Lebanon is a country of services, it cannot live without having a very good banking system and good system of exchange. This makes investors from the Arab countries hesitant from going to Lebanon. Of course, we are not seeing what we hope for the Lebanese economy nowadays.
Do you think, Mr. Ambassador, like an IMF loan would help the country to recover a bit of its economic founding?
Contrary to many people who are thinking badly against the IMF, I think IMF has helped many countries. Even Egypt, we have benefited from the IMF several times, and it was very successful treatment between Egypt and the IMF. But if IMF is helping you without you helping yourself, this will be a disaster. And the slogan of the German economy and economic cooperation with others is God helps those who are helping themselves.
Yes.
Because if you don't help yourself, no IMF loan or no IMF advice will make the trick.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, another issue that I wanted to raise with you with regards to Lebanon is after, let's assume that a cabinet is formed and the parliament approves the cabinet, etc. Presidential elections are also around the corner, or they're supposed to be around the corner, yet no candidate has yet come forward. Another challenge in the political sphere in the country.
It looks like a boat which cannot move at the seashore. When you push the boat to move, you don't know from which part of the boat exactly it will move. But you are trying to push from the presidential election, from the parliament, from the combination of the cabinet. If you push all this to the right direction, maybe the boat will flow. And here we can be a little bit optimistic. If something would go, then the acceleration of this process will bring the country in a good position.
Indeed, Mr. Ambassador. And, the Lebanese people themselves are the main victims of all these standoffs, the situation on the ground with regards to incomes and livelihoods for the Lebanese. We are seeing a lot of struggling, and the percentage of the population that is now living under the poverty line has increased dramatically.
Yes, and really I admire the Lebanese people. They are very wise people. They live together all the time without problems. Now we encourage them to come to reason. And as you rightly said, in order to save those needy classes who are really suffering, the real suffering classes. Really, we have to help them. And let us hope that as soon as possible we shall see the Lebanon which we are looking forward, and the Lebanon which we know all the time.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the role of Arab nations, the Arab League, etc. How about the international community? What can they do in order to help the situation?
Absolutely, and a country in the size and the weight of France can, of course, do something. And the European Union is a highly good friend of Lebanon. Also, I want to come to the wise people of Lebanon, such as Senora or Hariri or all these people who can cooperate with a good foreign friend. Maybe the United Nations can help. Every sort of help is required and necessary. But of course, we are the close neighbor of Lebanon. We are the Arab countries and the Arab League. I think we are able, and we have all the necessary requirements to help Lebanon. But of course, as you rightly said, international and regional organizations can be of a good help for Lebanon also.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant to Foreign Minister. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. And that's all the time we have for today's episode of Arab Affairs. My name is Angie Meher. Many thanks for joining us.